Hi, I'm Anthony Fury in for Ezra. Thanks so much for joining us. Only 20% of voters in the United States think the climate conversation is settled. That's coming from a recent Rasmussen poll. Furthermore, 48% of respondents in that poll think there is still significant disagreement within the scientific community. There is no comparable poll conducted in Canada. Well, why did they do the poll in the first place? Because both the Los Angeles Times and the BBC, get this, now have a policy in place that bans online commenting from those who deny climate change is a serious problem. Now, I was previously the opinion pages editor at the Ottawa Sun, and let me tell you, you only ban comments if they're seriously egregious, if they're racist, severe swearing, libelous, etc. To ban one set of opinions, that's just extremist madness. If a guy wants to go on a Sun website and say the Earth is flat, whatever, all power to him. But what do these poll results, though, tell us? Now, I'm an average Joe on this issue. Unlike your regular host, Ezra Levant, I haven't written books on the matter. I don't have a decisive answer to give you on the nitty-gritty details. All I see is that regular citizens are being pulled this way and that by the fact war going on between different camps of experts. So average folks don't know what to believe. And the average Joe, folks, is always the victim. Collateral damage whenever big wig experts are allowed to engineer their lives. Their great ideas, well, they generally do two things to us. They cost us billions of our tax dollars, and they limit our freedoms through restrictive regulations. All because the actions may improve some part of our lives in the future. You see, this is the inherent danger in letting big government have too much power over our lives. Because of this, whenever there is considerable dissent, I say government must err on the side of doing less. What's a doctor's first responsibility? Do no harm. Here's a breaking example of what I'm talking about here. The United Nations was presented with a roadmap to avoid a climate catastrophe on Tuesday, prescribing specific actions for the world's biggest economies. That's the opening of a story in the British newspaper The Guardian. Now, Canada is one of those 15 countries that's on the receiving end of these specific edicts. The report looks into, I quote, electricity supply, transport and shipping, and building codes in each country. So basically, we've got experts who have managed to ascend to positions of influence in these pseudo-government operations that don't answer to anyone. They want to foist these all-encompassing roadmaps, as they call them, onto countries to re-engineer them. The Guardian story concludes, the report acknowledges that the technologies it incorporates in its findings, including carbon capture, are not yet available on a widespread commercial scale. It also makes no attempt to offer a cost-benefit analysis of the sweeping transformation that would be needed in all 15 countries to keep warming within 2 degrees Celsius. So in other words, these folks are genuinely passionate about this looming catastrophe that they desperately want to avert right now. But they're not looking into the feasibility or the cost of what they want to do. Well, here's what Alberta PC leadership candidate Jim Prentice, and he's a former federal environment minister, said about carbon capture in a Calgary Herald story published Thursday. It has not progressed at the pace that people have thought. It's still important, and we should not abandon it, but we should be very careful of large public investments in carbon capture and storage. Public investments. That's the key clause here. I'm not arguing nobody should be poking into these issues. It's obvious society is moving somewhere in the direction of some sort of green revolution. Look, it's impossible to drive around cities like London, Toronto, or LA. The consumer is soon going to demand new, better, faster, whatever, more efficient transportation methods. Ontario energy bills are rising nearly 50% over the next 5 years. So who out there doesn't think it would be amazing to just put a small windmill or a couple solar panels in their backyard and never have to pay for electricity again? But the technology just isn't there. And when it is, it will be individual human innovation driving it, not fanciful government edict. There will be trillions of dollars to be made in such endeavors. Corporations know this. That's why they've put the R&D money into it. And government, may I remind you, is always steps behind business. For these reasons, it's wrong to dump hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars into companies like Solyndra, which went bankrupt and cost U.S. taxpayers possibly up to $850 million. because the government has no place picking winners and losers in business, and usually screws up when they do. Now, are there legitimate concerns out there? Of course. But when only 20% of people believe the debate is over, that means people have all sorts of views on the issue. And what's the harm in that? Diversity is good. Let's have a race to the top of good ideas. Let human ingenuity figure it out. It's simply wrong to let one group of people operating top down to force humanity into living a certain way.
No country is going to undertake actions on climate change, no matter what they say. No country is going to take actions that are going to deliberately destroy jobs and growth in their country.
Joining me in studio now, Sun News contributor Paige McPherson. Paige, you watch the general climate, in the public opinion of the climate change conversation going on in this country. I said there's not comparable data in the U.S. What do you think of the monologue, and how do you think it squares up to how things operate in Canada right now?
Well, one thing that is for certain, which would be the same in Canada as it is in the U.S., is that although the climate debate may not be settled, it is amongst those politicians that want to create policies that are going to put regulations on our lives and really stranglehold business in a variety of ways. For them, the debate is settled. For us, and for the average person, according to this poll in the United States as well, you know, the debate is not settled even among scientists. But what is settled, Anthony, is the negative impact that these kinds of policies have on our everyday lives. We know, and you said in your monologue, that energy bills in Ontario are up nearly 50%, and that's partially due to these kinds of green shift policies that we're moving towards, you know, solar and wind energy, whatever kind of green policies and energy is trendy at the time. That's part of the reason why, and shutting down coal plants and the like. So our energy costs are up. We also know that these policies are going to have a negative impact on businesses, employers, employees, and whatnot. So that's something that we do know for sure, although perhaps the climate debate we don't know for sure yet.
And let me ask you this, because I think this is integral to the conversation. Do you think that the politicians, whether they be in Canada or the United States, who get behind this, and I think you're very right to say that they're all sort of the political class is generally behind it, even if the regular folks aren't. Do you think they've sat down and they've done the committee hearings and they're reading all these different studies? I talk about the fact wars, and they figured out this is where I side in the fact war. Or do you think they go, well, I can get some political points in this? Or, which is probably where I'm leaning to go, they think politicians must always be doing more, and politicians have done as much as they can. I mean, you can get everything free right now. I mean, there's no more, you know, government is so expansive. They think, here's a new thing we can do, because we always got to be doing more to exercise our political power. Where do you think they're lying here?
Well, certainly, you know, Kathleen Wynne, for example, if we're talking about Ontario's energy policy, she herself has said that government needs to be a force for good. Notice the word force in that statement, of course. She really believes that government...
Good by gunpoint.
Yes, well, exactly, right? I mean, she does believe that government needs to do things to better people's lives and be very involved in people's lives in order to make society what she believes is a better place.
What was that quote at the debate? Taxes are what we pay to look after each other. Fine, if you're talking about a basic social safety net. She was talking about the expansionist stuff.
Right, exactly. So while perhaps, yes, Kathleen Wynne and Justin Trudeau and these kinds of politicians in Canada and President Obama in the United States, perhaps they do believe that climate change is 100% man-made and that we can implement policies that are going to curb that. Maybe they believe that, but at the same time, this is a thing that's very trendy in society right now. It absolutely is going to gain them political capital, perhaps not really affecting the average voter in terms of their opinion, but definitely affecting the political class, advocacy groups, environmental groups that are going to be there to fund and support their campaigns.
I'm glad you bring up the point trendy, because one of the points I'm trying to make in the monologue is that when we have these all-encompassing programs, they often lock us into a 20-year, 40-year plan that spends this much money. So it's a trendy thing today. Is it going to be trendy in the 2030s? I don't know, maybe not, but we suddenly get locked into these programs that have long-standing ramifications. And I think that's the danger of, oh, this is hip right now, lock people in for the foreseeable future?
Well, gee, wasn't it just in the 1980s that David Suzuki was warning about global cooling? I mean, certainly these things are absolutely trendy. Whether or not they're going to be trendy down the road, I mean, probably not. They probably will change, and that's why, you know, I would certainly support sunset clauses on basically everything that government does.
Excellent point. No, sunset clauses we need more of. We hardly have any of them.
Yeah, to shutter the policies when they just don't, when either they become out of trend or they just become completely absurd. Either way, we have a lot of policies and a lot of laws in our society right now that have absolutely no place but are still there because there simply wasn't a sunset clause, even though perhaps they were trendy or vote getting or whatever the intention was when they were put in place at the time.
Paige McPherson, thank you for your take on this.